In this tutorial, we are going to talk about creating a daylight system. In order to create a daylight system so that we can light our scene, I'm going to create a scene first. I'm going to create a plane, and I'm going to place a teapot in there, and I'm going to create, let's say, a box. And let's have some extended primitives in there as well. The torso not there. Go to front viewport and maybe bring this up. I'm not explaining all the shortcuts I'm pressing because you can see them down here in the bottom left corner of the screen. Also, in order to be more familiar with the shortcuts I use and the useful shortcuts, you can watch the 3ds Max basic tutorials that I have, so you can understand the concepts better. So we have these sphere tools here. What I might also do is go create a sphere and say base to pivot and create that there as well. What I'm going to do before I start creating the daylight system, which is the light basically, I'm going to start adding some texture to these. I'm going to use the Mentoray renderer because the textures that we are going to use are Arcan Design textures, and those Arcan Design textures only work if you have a Mentoray texture, a Mentoray setting on. So if I press M or click on this icon over here to open my material editor, you can see right now I have these Arcan Design materials, which are blank and or black, if you like. They're not showing. That's because my renderer is not Mentoray. In order to change my render to Mentoray, I'm going to press F10. I'm going to go to the comment tab and scroll all the way down to the bottom of my menu, click on Assign Renderer, and then click on these 3 dots and change it to Mentoray. Now, as you can see, all those spheres or the materials are visible. In order to get an Arcan Design texture, if you don't have it already, you may have a standard texture. Your texture may look like this, and you may have these everywhere. Also, before I continue, some of you may view your material editor like this. This is the slate material editor, and you can go to modes and either choose the compact mode or you can choose the slate material mode. It really doesn't matter, it's up to you. For this tutorial, I will use the slate because it's a newer versions, and it seems like more people are starting to use this now. You could have a standard material, just click and drag that there, or if you're using the compact mode, you could just click on here and choose standard. But in our case, we're not using standards, we are using an Arcan Design texture, which is over here. So in the slate material editor, you could just drag in an Arcan Design texture, or in the compact mode, you can click on where it says standard and choose Arcan Design. But in order to see this, you must have Mentoray set as your renderer. So make sure before you come here, you press F10, sorry, cancel that, you press F10, scroll all the way down to Assign Renderer and make sure this says Mentoray. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to Mentoray, Arcan Design, I'm sorry, and I'm going to apply that to this, and I'm going to choose a preset, let's say thin glass, and I'm going to set this one to copper. I'm going to click and drag that over here. I'm going to choose chrome for, let's say, the teapot. Now let's go to the next one and choose glaze ceramic and put that there. Make sure you're in shaded mode and not realistic mode, because realistic mode will give you all this extra noise and it tries to give you realistic shadow creation, but you don't really need that. Make sure you have set this to shaded, so it speeds up your viewport as well. What we're going to do now, actually, I'm going to bring up my material editor. I forgot to put a texture on this plane down here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to choose rough concrete, and just put rough concrete on the plane here. So now we have something to get a render for. If I press F9, which is rendering, you can see that it looks quite simple. There's nothing fancy going on. If I zoom in actually a little bit more, and get another render. You can see that yes, that does look like glass because it's see-through. That roughly looks like chrome. I think that was metal or bronze, and not sure what that was. It's fine, but it's not good. It's not good enough. So what we're going to do is create a daylight system. In order to do that, you want to go to Create, Lights, Daylight System. As soon as you click, you will get a message that says, you're creating a daylight system. It is recommended that you use the Mentor photographic exposure control set to an exposure value of EV equals 15. Exposure control settings can be adjusted from the environment and effect dialog. Would you like to change this now? Yes. What that did, if I press 8 on my keyboard, so you go to the environment map, what it did, it changed my exposure control to Mentor photographic exposure control exposure value equals EV15. That's what it did. Before that, it was set to no exposure controls. But because we select yes to that option, what it did, it put a Mentor photographic exposure control and it set EV value to 15. So I'm going to click and drag, and it gives me another message, and it says you're creating a Mentor sky. It is recommended to also add a Mentor physical sky environment. Do you want to do this? Yes. And if I go back to my 8, now you can see that in the environment map it says Mentor physical sky. If you just go back to go back to where I was talking about Mentor photographic exposure control, you will see that before we click yes to this set pop-up window, this said none. So now we have a Mentor physical sky in there as well. So if I get a render now, I don't have a black background because that's the physical sky, and everything else looks a little bit better, especially with the teapot because it's chrome and it's almost so it's looking much better. What we could do is we could select the sky or the sun, go to the modify panel. We could go ahead and try changing some of the settings here. You have multiplier set to 1. If you need more light, you could increase that setting. You can also go to your setup, which will just take you to the motion tab. Just took me to the motion tab. There's a pretty much cool feature here you could use. You could have get location, and it will give you the map of the world. You could just choose entire, or you could choose a certain continent. For example, let's go to Europe and let's choose London, for example. You cannot move the sun on its own. It won't work. However, you can do is you can select the compass and you can rotate the sun so that you can say north is that way, for example. If I go to if I select sun and here I choose manual, if I choose manual, then it will allow me to move the sun around. But for as long as this is set to date, time, and location, I will not be able to do that. What I could also do is I could say let's do April, certain day, doesn't matter. You could have another month, January, February, March, doesn't matter. What year, what hour of the day is it? It's 10 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, 1/2 even. You could just change the time there and it will affect the settings accordingly. I'm going to press 8 to go to my environment menu again. Down here in the presets, already it says exposure value EV15. In the preset menu, I could click and I could say that my environment is physically based lighting because I also have a physical sky there. And it's outdoor daylight. That's what I'm aiming for. So I'm going to say outdoor daylight, and I'm going to render that. And you can see it looks a little bit different now. I cannot tell you what settings to use. You just have to go and experiment with them and see which one works best for you and for your needs. Now, if I was to create a room, so I'm going to very quickly go ahead and create a box. This box will represent a room, and if I go inside the room now and I press F9, you can see that I can't see the box that I've just made. The reason for that is because by default in 3D Studio Max, polygons are one-sided. So if I just create a plane here to explain to you what that means, if I was to create a plane here, you can see that if I press F9, I can see this and I can see the house. Great. But if I look at this plane from the other side, I will not see the plane because only one side of the plane is see-through. This is see-through, this is visible. If I look at the plane from this angle, I see it. If I look at it from this angle, I don't see it. It's the same with the box. The box, we see the outside, so when I render it, I can see the outside of the box. Great, but when I go inside and I press F9, I don't see the box itself. In order to be able to see that box, there are two methods I could use. Number one, I could go to my material editor, select the material, choose standard, make sure I have a standard material, and also if you can see all these materials and what you see looks like this, for example, which in many cases it does, and you don't want to go and navigate through like this, you can just right click on any of these and say 6x4, choose a standard material, apply a standard material and click on two-sided. That will make sure that it renders both sides. In this case we don't see it because of the sun, but let me just show you that we're not seeing it because the box is casting shadows inside. So if I was to select that and click it here, if I press F9, I can see it from both sides because it's a two-sided texture. That's one of the options that I could use. The other option is I could select the box and add a shell modifier to it. So select the box, go to modify panel, add a shell modifier to it, and it will create, if I press F3, I'm going to right click on the box and say isolate selection, so we only have the box and nothing else. Let me increase the outer amount, so you can see that it's got two sections to the box. It's got an inside and an outside. That will also fix your problem. In this case, because I'm using a two-sided texture, I'm going to delete shell. I'm going to create, if I actually exit isolation so you can see the items are in there now. If I go inside the house and I render it, it's completely black. The reason being is because we are inside the box, there are no lights coming in, and no light means darkness. So what I'm going to have to do is I need to create some windows in order to let some light in. So in the modify panel, I'm going to add a couple of segments. I'm going to convert it to editable poly. I'm going to select this, hold Control, select these four for example, and delete them. So now there are some room for light to go in. But if I render this, if I go inside, so let me just actually close that, select one of these items and just scroll in a little bit. If I press F9 now, even though I can see the items now because I'm having some light coming in, it's too dark. This is not the kind of environment you would expect when you have four windows and a clear sun. The reason that this is what we're seeing is because if I press 8 to go to my environment and effect menu, the preset that we chose was outdoor daylight system. We are not outdoors now, we're rendering something indoors. So if I change that from outdoor daylight to indoor daylight and press F9, you can see it's a completely different setting. There are much more light inside. Of course we have all these artifacts here, which isn't very nice. Hopefully in some other tutorials I will explain how you could fix that as well. Actually, might as well talk about that for a little bit. If I press F10 to go to my render settings, what I could do, I could go to indirect illumination, make sure final gather is on, which it is. I could also go to render And I could change this from the samples per pixel. I could change the minimum to, let's say, 1 and the maximum to 16. Press F9. Not much improvement there, so I'm going to cancel that. Let's change the filter from box. Box, I believe, it works just fine. You could, go from Mitchell and Lankos as well. Try to try the different effects and different settings here. I could go to indirect illumination. Let's enable global illumination and press F9 with the current settings that there exists. Actually, we can't use global illumination at this stage. Sorry, that's not even GI, that's GI. Now with global illumination on, you can see that the artifact has not necessarily completely disappeared, but it has improved. So you will need to go through the settings and play around with the settings. Hopefully I will explain all of this in an upcoming video tutorial as well. But at this stage, all I wanted you guys to understand was the use of the skylight, the daylight system, how to create one, especially for outdoor usage. And I hope you enjoyed the tutorial.